We're here with Dennis Chin, who's got a really cool story, and I'm really excited for this to kind of learn about your journey, Dennis, in football, as a Jamaican national, but playing in the US at college level, at pro level, and then also in the sports agency and a whole bunch of cool stuff and questions I've got lined up there. But Dennis, tell me about you. I'm sure people have heard of your name before, but tell me about your background from little boy playing soccer, football in Jamaica through to moving to the US and how you made it pro and that side of your life.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Feel honored to be in this in this space. But for me, I was born in Jamaica. My father's Chinese, so Jamaican Chinese household. Really big on education, but somehow I slipped through the cracks and started getting on the streets to play. Right. I think it was the '94 World Cup when I was really young that it just really hit me how much passion was in the game, and then it comes into the '98 when it was Jamaica's first time qualifying for the World Cup. So we got a national holiday because of it. So it made a huge impact on me on what the sport could do, like for a nation, much less just playing it, right? So I got my starts just playing on the streets for fun. I was a terrible schoolboy footballer when I was really young, and from those ages, even U9, under 10, there were three substitutions, right? Even in Jamaica at those times, so I wasn't really getting on the field, but luckily, my father ended up moving me and my brother to the U.S. When I was around 11 or so, and I took that passion with me. There was no street football on the around. Everyone was playing baseball or American football, and things like that. But I just still had that passion, and I know my father used to say homework is work you do at home. So we used to always have extra lessons after school because the American school system was a lot easier than the Jamaican school system at the time, and come home, and after my work I would just go out and play, and I would check out, and like I had to read books. I would check out books on Pele and Maradona, and then just was obsessed with football, and got into the club soccer here, but just on the recreational side, because like I said, my parents weren't really into the sport like that. But then I just got better and better, and I used to go back to Jamaica in the summers and then play on the streets all day. So I was always playing against older guys. I was small, skinny, nothing to me, but I was always like thinking, and I cared about dribbling and skills. And I remember Yoga Bonito commercials came out, and I was obsessed with all the skills. And then I got to high school level, and that's when it starts really clicking for me. I think I was always, like a dribbler and, number 10. And I was 5'2" at like 15. I was really small, and as I got into my junior, which is the third year of the fourth of high school, I just grew. I got faster and bigger than everyone else out of nowhere. So I took the skill sets as a small player and now added to athleticism, and I just started scoring a bunch of goals. So they kind of moved me more up front in a striker because I was quick. And yeah, and that's when I started getting college offers and an interest, and that's when my dad was like, "Oh, you can take this to be school to get school scholarships from this." Okay,
He's
now
interested
we're
then.
talking. You know what I mean? It's like, oh well, and now they were like, all right, yeah, yeah, maybe you should play this a little bit more, right? And then I had some, my parents were only interested in me going to Ivy League schools, and I had some, I went on a recruiting trip to Columbia and Cornell, but for a longer story, I ended up at a smaller school in Florida. I was going to be a mathematics major and focus a lot on school. But it was Division 2. We had a good team. Because, like I said, I wasn't really thinking about being like a pro. I was just, education and the love of the game, right? Enjoying myself off the field, loving the game, and then education. And as I got to the end of my collegiate career, and I was doing really well and winning conference awards and stuff like that, that's when I was like, wait. I don't want to finish playing. Like, what's after that? And I think that's when I really started like thinking about, all right, what would that look like to be a pro? Around us, I was in Florida at the time. There was no professional teams anywhere near in the entire state at that point. Um, and yeah, I had no one to look up to. I didn't know any professional players. Everyone I've known was on TV in the Premier League, etc. And I just started kind of asking around, and then it came to me that there's USL and all these leagues that were below the MLS because you had to get drafted. But I was coming from a Division 2 program, so I was never going to get drafted. So I decided to start preparing myself to go on trials. We don't know agent, no nothing, just preparing myself to go on trials. And the luckiest thing I think in my life happened at that time when in 2010 in fall, Orlando City was announced that this new professional team was gonna come in my backyard right as I'm finishing school. But then I didn't know anything really about it. My dad was really interested in it, and he ended up becoming an initial investor in Orlando. But it had nothing to do with me. I was like just training to be a pro. I didn't know what was going on there. And then I was invited to play like in 6v6 game, possession and in small sided games. And Adrian Heath, Everton, ex Manchester City, Espanol player who was announced as the head coach, came out to that session and saw me and invited me to preseason. That's how I got seen for Orlando
Happened pretty
City.
quick.
Got like crazy. It just happened like out of all the players, he saw me and said, "Hey, listen, this guy has something." I came in, didn't expect anything. I had my entire, you know, my entire thought process was just to learn and you just to be appreciative of the environment. And I was one of only the two younger guys in the team because it was a pretty veteran oriented team that he had played and moved on. And then yeah, I ended up getting a contract for a year to just see how I did. Didn't play any at all in the first few months because I was learning and I remember I thought I was a good technical player, right? I was a 10 and you know what I mean? But I wasn't enough for that level. So he used to tell me after every training session I needed to hit the boards, which is, you have the boards all around you and you hit the ball
Yeah.
against the walls. And so I really became like obsessed with the boards and technical aspect. And then I had elite pace at that time, like sprinter pace, probably the fastest. I was the fastest by far, probably in the league.
Is this the Jamaican roots coming
Yeah, the
coming to
Jamaican roots
Adelaide?
came through to me, and so to add that, he was teaching me movement off the ball, double runs, all these things that by the end of the season, it just clicked. I started scoring every game. I helped the team win this first title, got an offer for a multi-year deal, and in my second year, won the USL Golden Boot, and was an all-league player, and then it kind of just propelled my career from there. So yeah, it was, I just chalked it up to a lot of good things that happened to me at the right times, to even got me into that situation of being a pro. And then I just never really looked back until obviously now. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into
You sound very humble. I'm sure there was a lot of hard work that went into
it.
it. Would you say I talk about this to different people, but in football you see a lot of kind of early developers, late developers. You mentioned about being quite short at the age of 15. Do you find and we're going to come up back to player agency a bit later on and link this back in, I think. But yeah, how did you find the determination to continue going? And was it just a love for the game that just made you keep going? And then it got to a point where you obviously had a growth spurt and all of a sudden it kind of all came together for you. How do you keep going mentally when you know that maybe you're the smallest in the team, for example?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was my own passion, right? I didn't have a parent like telling me what to do. In fact, if I was gonna get in trouble, he's gonna take away football. So I was really motivated more so internally, and I think when you're more motivated internally, it's a lot different. Also, for me, it was pride. I know a lot of, when I first started my agency, I did a lot about the whys, like why we play, why we wake up, every morning to do what we do. And for me, playing football, it was never, monetary or anything like that. It was mainly pride and respect. So I had this deep drive to be respected by my peers on the field, and someone who like, oh man, that was a good player, or oh man, like he's so skillful, or you know what I mean? And despite the aspect of being small, and they were like, oh man, you didn't like I didn't make my varsity team as a freshman, which was like a big goal for mine, which is a top team for high school, right? I was because I was too small. So yeah, that was really hurtful for me by knowing that like I was technically better than a lot of those guys, but I couldn't physically handle those kind of hits
Yeah.
in what my coach thought. But for me, I was like, well, I'm better at you at so many other things. I'm gonna prove. You know, it was just more motivation for me at that time, and I think I just came up in a family where just hard work and actual repetitions and like just doing things the right way was such a big thing that like I I, I was always taught not to quit. I remember I dropped chemistry my sophomore year of high school, and my dad was like, "Oh, this is the biggest deal. Like, oh, you're gonna if you quit now, you're gonna quit. You'll be a quitter for life." And you know what I mean. So I think because of that, I just had that like focus that regardless of what's gonna happen, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna try. And I think that was like the basis of why I kept going. Really.
And what were you considering other than soccer beyond college in terms of like career options? You mentioned mathematics. What were you looking at? What was your other plan if this or was there no other plan?
I mean, if you ask my family, they wanted me to be a biomedical engineer,
Yeah.
and all that, as
Very
complicated
different
as you think.
industry.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, as complicated as you want. But I ended up getting studying economics afterwards, mainly because it was just a much easier than the math path as far as my schedule when it came to football. But no, I had no clue. I think. Every Chinese family was thinking doctor. I need to get at least some degrees under my belt because that's what my dad did, and his siblings and blah 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 blah. And I was the eldest of my generation, the eldest son of four boys. So I had that like mantle of like
That's a big pressure.
yeah, that pressure, right? Which my brothers never really had, really. But and then they end up playing soccer after me because of that. But no, I didn't have like a specific. I think when I started taking economic path, I think the other aspect was good to go into finance after, and maybe get an MBA and do that whole path and
Yeah, yeah.
financial. Because my stepmom was really big into that, so that's it. I didn't really have any like backup plan, and that's and just a little thing for that. I think that honestly think that because I didn't necessarily have this set backup plan after football, I think that kind of also kept me sharp considering my background. Like, yeah, I was from a pretty humble beginning, but it was not as humble as some of these guys from Africa and that, would literally would not survive without football, right?
Yeah.
They had to get their families out. But so my sword wasn't, I call it my sword wasn't as dulled. It was still sharp because I was still so hungry because I didn't know what I was going to do yet afterwards, right? When sometimes, you're taught to have options, and I didn't really go to college to have options. Like some people, like, oh, my backup plan. It wasn't really a mindset on that. I was just really one tracked as someone from my more privileged background could have had, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. And how much has soccer evolved in that time frame? I talk a lot about this in terms of the evolution of soccer in the US and not necessarily a traditional American sport, but really coming into a really great period and great growth over the past couple of decades. How much has it changed, the general soccer scene over the past 10, 15 years since you arrived in the US?
I would say it's changed a great deal, a great deal. I mean, back in the day, it was very, very. I mean, it's pay for play. We all know that about the U.S., right? And obviously, it wasn't as expensive and travel oriented as probably it is now. But mostly the difference came in when the MLS started really coming in with this whole academy and all that aspect. Technically, I would be considered the first ever Orlando City homegrown because I came through all the system here. Even even in college, I played in Orlando, right? But the clubs that I played for as a youth became Orlando City Youth, right? So that is like for me, like I guess so it's so different because now it's so much more structured, and these kids are primed to be first team players, right? Where back in the day you're primed to go to college and get a college scholarship, or you're primed to maybe get more out of the team aspect and social aspect of it. And the parents were friends with each other, and the coaches weren't that great, but they were like, you know what I mean? They're teaching life lessons. And now it's really more like, hey, how many top pros can we create? Can we create
Mm.
one per age group if we're lucky, two per age group as if we're lucky, and then the rest kind of like, yeah, you go to college or whatever as the least. If you're in the MLS Developmental Academy. So yeah, those opportunities just wasn't that there. It wasn't that focused on. It didn't have this aspect of the greater scheme. It was really like, oh, you're going to play football for fun, and then go up, and then hopefully you get a scholarship at the end of it because you played it well enough. So it's changed a lot.
Yeah, it seems like it's evolving even more. It's interesting because I'm from London, in the UK, and we haven't got the same push towards collegiate level and college scholarships that you have in the US. So in terms of the pathway and sort of parental expectation or pressure or whatever you call it to kind of go the college route and kind of get a scholarship and play at a very, very good level, or a pro pathway in the UK is if you're good at football and you want to pursue it, you go in the pro route because of the sheer number of clubs, right? And that playing at university, college, and getting scholarships for playing football isn't a thing in the UK. It's really interesting to see that, but it's now interesting to see, and I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on it, but obviously the MLS very established, lots of money in the MLS, and now USL is now getting more investment. By the sounds of it, the recent announcement about USL having promotion, relegation, and more investment coming into that side of the division, and having this kind of slightly different league to the MLS. Do you see pathways changing going forward for players in the US in terms of, or do you feel like generationally or kind of the collegiate way is a very Americanized thing that's going to not really change at all? Because I'm thinking, like you mentioned about, more and more clubs now having, like I was speaking to Jose Campos at Orlando City, the academy director there, as well as Larry Sunderland and FC Cincinnati, and talking about how, they have their academies from U13 boys up, up towards the kind of first team. And yes, there's obviously a drive to try and get players in the first team, but there's also they kind of talk to parents and players about college level and what might happen and kind of preparing them for maybe not the pro route and that sort of stuff. What do you think what's gonna happen in the next 10 years in terms of pathways? Do you think that there's gonna be more and more focus on just getting pro in the US, or is it still too early for that?
Um, it's a really interesting question because as it's become so pro reliant right now because of so many pro clubs all of a sudden popping up in the last 10 years. And now you, like you said, you have USL now. There's USL academies and USL players that can sign an academy contract that can make first team debuts at 15, 16, right? So there's so much more options for a professional pathway, but the college route is so ingrained in the culture here. And as we were talking about, this pro reliant investment in development, there's also a huge investment nowadays in college because of this NIL and name, image, likeness situation, right? There's paid players now in college, not so much on the men's side of football, of soccer, because it's so, that the best men's players are already getting scooped up by in MLS academies, then there will be homegrowns and blah blah blah. So you're getting a lot of the late bloomers out of the MLS, out of the college system mainly, and foreign players that may have dropped out of Manchester United youth and they came to America for a scholarship and then they remake it like Jack Harrison, or did. But in the women's game especially, college is A1 and it's still going to be A1 in the path of development because of there's not that many people that kids or girls that are going to go through U18s and become a pro. The NWSL is setting that up to be more and more. And but the Division One college level is still the queen, I guess, as creating theirs as the stepping stone for the majority. And to be fair, now they're paying those girls, right? So like we negotiated a girl to go to a Division One school, and she would make more than she would than a lot of guys in probably League Two, maybe in England or
Mhm.
USL, or she's making good money to be there per year, and then she gets a athletic scholarship and housing and tuition, right? Like, so once you now
Attractive, right?
have these options in, they're almost mini pro level. Like, you know what I mean? They're almost lower division clubs in a sense of development, right? So I think that's it's just so ingrained into the culture here with the system that I think that the NCAA is now I think they're talking about for soccer to have a year-round schedule now. I think it's just kind of integrating more into becoming a part of that pyramid, much more than, oh, it's just a separate environment. So yeah, I think there's a big shift in like the education of the players here in America because we didn't have the best coachings before, but we're
Mhm.
seeing more and more people from in Europe or South America coming in with their styles and then mixing in with the culture, and you just have like so many different developmental paths, and it's different for different cultures, right? So I think it's changing, but the college system I don't think goes away.
Yeah, and what do you see as the big opportunities? And we're going to come to your agency real soon, but what's the big opportunities you think over the next kind of 10 years for players and academies and clubs? Obviously, there's a lot of movement. The World Cup is next year. There's going to probably be another legacy behind that, similar to 94. Where do you see the big opportunities and wins for players and clubs are in US soccer?
I mean, the World Cup's huge. That's a huge thing. I think a lot of the push to have all these professional clubs right now is based on the World Cup. I mean, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the push for investors were saying, hey, listen, we saw what happened in 94. We saw what happened with all these in other nations
Yeah.
when the World Cup comes through and the economic impact and how it pushes soccer on that stage. Um, that's just going to happen in the US. And if you want to be before that whole boom, because then you're going to be, the valuation of the clubs, etc., are going to be that much greater, right? So yeah, I think that so that's a huge deal right now, even in our recruitment of players, right? We're seeing a lot of great players are coming over to the US earlier and parting and using that as part of investment because they know the World Cup is coming, right? Next year, right? I mean, even for a US based agency as we are, we're getting a lot of interest from bigger players what want a management from a US based company because of our link to these World Cup that World Cup boom and our ability to maybe get sponsors or brand partnerships because of all this eyes on the US. So I think it's going to be a big boost. It's really going to be interesting to see how much and like how much does it change the landscape, but or does it change the landscape at all? Maybe we're just looking for this big boost that'll never come because so many people have think that's going to happen and it just kind of flops. But it's really going to be interesting. But I can tell you that a lot of it's affected in a positive way so far, the entire landscape.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Talk to me about your agency then. So you're currently working with Young Money, right? But before that, you start up your own agency. Before that, what made you go into that? Was it the kind of economics and kind of business link you've been studying before, and you kind of always had that bug, or was it come based on your own experience as a player? What happened? How did that work out?
Yeah, so I mean, as I was getting to the end of my playing career, I've always had like from when I was developing as a player, this very big like pull towards personal and player development. So as I was playing in my professional career, I had a personal and technical training business. I was really intrigued by how a player becomes a pro, how a youth player from, you know what I mean, this becomes a pro and this guy doesn't become a pro. I was really obsessed with these processes. I studied like, how did La Masia do it? How did, Crew Alexander Academy? I was really like obsessed with these things. And because of that, I thought my pathway would have been more into coaching. Um, because of that, I mean, even in my off seasons as a pro, I would take over a lot of the professional training. Like all the professional players that are in Central Florida, they would come to work with me, and we trained together, and I put together those sessions, and it was just something I was really passionate about. So I honestly was like, oh yeah, this coaching was that path for me. But right before I retired as a player, which I took a role to see just how how I could leverage this as a player and assistant coach in the USL at Richmond Kickers at the time, and I just when I was in that environment, I just realized I couldn't balance both. I couldn't be a player and I'd be an assistant coach. Like I just like it. I was just so much more of a player. I was a locker room guy. I was the guy the young guys came to every single time, and I would take people out, the guys out, and drive around the town, show them the city. I was always a guy, even as a college player, that they send the recruits to. If they wanted them to come to school, they put them with me, right? So it was really a big thing for me to now be on the authority side of it, the other end, and say, "All right, well, big coach said you are not playing today. You need to." I just couldn't handle that aspect of like a, a 25 player roster and 11 is gonna play, and the other ones 14 is gonna hate me. Like I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like something about that I couldn't like get around, and I just knew like as a professional on the professional side, it was way more results oriented. So it was really wasn't my thing, and it was really my agent at the time that mentioned, "Hey, listen, like you always help me get players, and you have an eye for player and talent, and who you seem to be usually right. Why don't you think about being an agent?" And my eyes were like, "No chance." I was like, "These guys, because I'm thinking, I had bad experiences and stuff. Like I just thought like it's a slimy career. You know how it is. You got
Get a bad rep, right? I get a bad
he had a
rep.
bad reputation about that agency, and I'm like, I'm helping guys right now for the good of my heart find clubs. You know what I mean? Like now to be paid to do it, like it didn't really like resonate with me at first, and then COVID hit, right? And then COVID hit, and there was so much like you know crazy stuff going on where like fans and four people could train at a time and small train, and I was like, all right, I gotta focus on what I'm gonna do next. My wife wanted to start a family, and I could have kept playing at the offers, and then that's when I started asking teammates, and like who some people became sporting directors, head coaches in media, and that's when I kind of start getting on the aspect of like, all right, what if I became an agent? What would that look like? How would I do it? Would I join a big firm and then learn and intern maybe and then go from there, or what would I do? And that's when I started taking it more seriously and like, hey, listen, if I'm gonna do this, I would want to build an agency myself. That way I can choose how I work with everyone. I have my own rules. I have my, you know what I mean? I have my own markets that I would work in, whatever that's going to be the case. And because of that, that's when I kind of thought about going on my own. But the biggest piece for me was to model it after how I would have wanted to be treated as a player, right? And that was always going to be the biggest thing. So the rules were we're gonna always communicate every week if possible with our players. We're gonna watch their games. We're gonna find the pathways. We're not gonna just only go for players that are hyped and national team guys only. You know what I mean? Because they're the ones that everyone knows. We're gonna find guys that maybe weren't the biggest names, but was like me that could have made a jump. And we knew that we couldn't really jump in and be the biggest from the get go and get the biggest players. So we try to be creative and find uh, places that were known to be hotbeds, like the Caribbean, right, Eastern Europe, etc., and find out if we could like find talent other than just the U.S. national team and
You're
stuff.
resourceful, right?
Yeah, yeah, be resourceful. So I mean, it was like a big challenge. It's something that I really cared about, and that's what kind of put it up for me, right? So so yeah, this is really why I came into the agency space at first, because it was never a path for me to be in that space before.
Yeah, right. And so you start that out, and then what? So what is the? Tell me about a day in the life as an agent. I think it's one of those things that kind of Yeah, it gets a bad rep. But what would you say is kind of your, you mentioned about having busy peak periods and kind of, there's obviously the off season and so on. What does day in the life of Dennis look like right now in terms of representation? I know you've got a lot of clients here in the US, but also overseas too, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? I think that's one of the main reasons that that's a plus for me about being an agency. One is that we can be global, right? We can be here, we can be everywhere in a sense, and even though I'm located in the U.S., I work in all continents. So for me, I'm really I'm kind of obsessive about it. I don't really have, even though I have two little ones and everything else, my work-life balance is like all I think about is football and agency work, right? Like, so if I'm up at 8 a.m., I don't go to sleep till 3 a.m. I just think it all the time,
Yeah.
and it just becomes part of my schedule. I can be out with the kids riding bikes, and I'm taking a call with a player that has issues with their housing, right? Or I'm doing a visa for a guy that's coming from Nigeria to the US, or a player that's in Serbia. Like it just becomes like integrated into my life and my family's life. My wife was an ex-player. She came through on the women's side. She went to school. She totally different pathway as me. She went to college at 16. She was U.S. national team, U.S. pool. She was an All-American in college. She played in Germany. So I know like my entire family is football. Like, you know what I mean? And we understand, she understands the game enough that she knows like what is needed for a player, for actual player care. And for me, I'm just really online 24/7 on that. And it's not that like it doesn't feel like work for me. It's just like just my personality and my life is just how I am. So I'm usually, there's a couple of things that I usually do to be more specific. Um, what my role is in this, I mean, I can speak to how Young Money came about in a minute, but my role is to like is strategy, right? Is to enhance the brand, obviously, but find the best talent that fit our goals, our needs, and our name says it, right? Young, right? Young Money, right? We want them younger. We want to find and be able to help young players, because yeah, it's cool to get, maybe a Neymar or a bigger guy, but they don't need our support on our care as much as this young guy, right? And then obviously in the agency world too, there's not a lot of, maybe not a lot of loyalty, right? So as the more you get up into the structure and guys are making millions, and they probably don't even feel like they need you as much, and you know what I mean? They can throw you to the side and they go to the next one. So it's a little bit different for us. So I look at, like who we should be going after. I get into depth of it. I look at Y Scout. I look at all this stats, the data. But I'm more of a visual watching kind of person. I feel like that's the gift I've been given. Is I can see a player. I can see how a player moves. I can see that potential and the steps that needs to be taken. I would say age 17 and above. Below that, I know I'm not as expertise in it. There's so much can happen before that, and some guys
Yeah.
are. I know I depend on people that can identify a 12-year-old and say, "Oh, you need to watch these guys." But I'm not that guy. I know that. But once they hit 17, and I feel like I've seen some of their growth and development, that's when I feel like boom, I have it. I can tell you, and I think in these past few years, I've got to gain more confidence in my belief in my ability to identify that. Because even if there's players that I identify that we don't end up signing, I usually track to see how they do and see if I was really right or what pathways I would have taken for them, and you know what I mean. And it's just always becoming a learning thing for me. So that's bigger one. A lot of the day to day is keeping track of our own players that we already have, right? Anything they need, where if they're injured. But I'm basically a psychologist. I'm always in their head, like, hey, don't do that. Oh, you should do that. Oh, you're not playing. Oh, okay, don't freak out. This is part of the process, especially with the younger players. they tend to flip out about everything, and they get really into anxiety and all that kind of stuff. But that's the advantage I have of already being a player,
Yeah,
is
been there, done
knowing.
that.
Yeah, I've known what they're going through. I remember kind of how I felt, and I'm able to attach and connect to that with to them in that aspect. So it it really gives me an advantage in that aspect compared to maybe other aspects of being an Asian. And then, a lot of that has to do with the parents and the families too. I'm really good with family. Obviously, I have my own kids. I get it. You know what I mean? So, like, I try to create more. For me, it's a culture, right? And it's like a community that every one of our, whether it's agents or support staff or whatever, can feel the need to talk to me, or to talk to, or the players can talk to any one of them, and it's not this crazy authority like, oh, you don't talk to him about that, because some people connect to some people better, right? I'm Jamaican Chinese, but my partner Giuseppe, he's Swiss, Italian, Cuban, so we have a little bit of everything. And I think that culture is the biggest thing, because with a good culture, everyone tends to work harder. Everyone reaches their goals in a lot more efficiently. And that's the biggest thing that I try to cultivate each day, more than just saying, "Oh, wake up 9 a.m. and I'm doing this and I take calls here." I think it can look different based on the day.
Yeah, got it. And I'm going to come to the Young Money deal in a minute and what you guys are up to and like vision for you, I suppose. But you mentioned there about identifying players. What is it you look for when you mentioned about kind of 17 up, and it's kind of where you feel like you've got a real eye for it? What are you looking for in terms of, the playing ability, I guess? Is it mental? Is it behavior? What is it you're looking for from a player?
It's a bit of all of the above. Obviously, it's very easy to just get a national team kid when everybody knows that's good, right? Like, you have Kevin Sullivan, you're like, oh yeah, he's good, But I think it's more than that. I think we get a little bit deeper, because to like I told you, my thing was always the why, right? What motivates this player? What Because when we know that, it's really difficult for someone to fail, barring like this crazy situation of a crazy injury, that derails them,
Yeah.
right? Which is getting less and less these days with modern sports science, etc. But like for me, yeah, I look at like just everyone in the professional level at profiles, right? Can this player play at the top level, right? Obviously, at this point now, we're getting to the point that we want more and more top level talents, regardless of where they are right now, but the ability to play top level. So that might be physically, how do they move? Are they athletic? Are they, injury risk of injuries, the way they move? Can we rebuild them if they seem to be moving wrong? And because there's a lot of things what I like, for example, I was really quick, so I had in college a lot of hamstring injuries and a lot of just any explosive athletes, and I work with a high performance coach, and they rebuilt my running form. And throughout my entire career, I had no major injuries. I had no so I rebuilt it. So I was always obsessed with like, all right, how did I do it? Like, how can I give that to someone else? And that's why we brought in someone on high performance, because there's been a lot of ACL injuries in men again all of a sudden, and a lot of for different reasons. Obviously, the playing schedules are blamed, but it's always different reasons. So we've been kind of obsessive of that, of seeing how if we can be preventable in that. But for me, man, I look at footballers. What does that mean? I think that, yeah, you can find a kid that can dominate a level. He's the best U17. He's the MVP of the GA Cup, or the Milk Cup or whatever. But I can usually tell if those skill sets are able to be translated in each level. And it's different for different positions. For example, as a defender, yeah, I'm gonna look at your athletic ability, because the modern game is very, it's more and more transitional. The attackers are faster, stronger. Yeah, you gotta have some kind of base there. But the key thing, though, when I look at like maybe a center back, is their ability to take out, to see early the danger. You know what I mean? Or and that you take more of an eye to see that more than just like, oh, if he's winning duels data wise, right? Data wise, you
Yeah.
can be winning duels, whatever, but he could be so out of position in so many places
Yeah,
that
it's reactionary, yeah.
you're not seeing that in data. But like if I look at instincts and stuff that you can't really teach when they get older. If you're seeing it at 15, some things can be taught. We get it, but it's easier to teach those physical aspects like injury prevention and maybe a little bit more quickness and lateral quickness than it is for a guy to see something developing on a field and drop. Or you know what I mean, and on the attacking and that instinct of getting in good positions, right? It's underrated and under, right? And I look at the time that like I learned movement off the ball from someone who is great at movement off the ball. So I know that that can be taught, right? But if you have instinctively good finishing, now we add that movement off the ball, like and create it to make it more and more like like you're actually thinking about what you're doing and not just like reacting. I think that's things I look for. Who is going to be able to be taught in that way? If you added that extra on top of it, and then for midfielders, solutions. Who's finding solutions, right? The team is pressing you. Are you gonna keep doing the same things and doing it wrong? But at the end of the day, if I saw you in a game just make the wrong decisions over and over and over, but then you're maybe a winger and you have 20 goals of that season, right? I'm trying to figure out how do you score those 20 goals because you're not finding those solutions. Is it luck of the level, the competition of those other teams are so low, or it's just a bad game, or you just have a specific way of solving solutions that when you're in that environment, you're gonna score a bunch of goals. And if so, how do we put you in those specific places as a pro, right? Now we know that hey, listen, he cannot play in a tiki-taka style system. He has to play something that he's running behind. Like these are like things I'm really detailed on that, and that's why I can't really give you a specific answer on like yeah, you gotta have these, this, and this
Yeah.
because it's so positional based and so player based. Like the reason I pick one player might not be the reason I pick another. But as I said, I study this. Like I literally have looked at who's making it, why they're making it. I'll watch, Jack Wilshere's clips as a kid, and Andres Inies's clip as a kid, and then phone clip. And I was like, could I spot that kid back then? If I see a kid in MLS next right now and he's doing these things, would he become these kind of like these are things that always run through
Mm.
my mind. I think I'm a lot more specific than most agents in that aspect because of my background. But yeah, I think that's how you make sure you find the real guys that have those qualities and not just all right he has those qualities at 18 because he's bigger than everyone else or he's faster than everyone else or he's just thinking quicker than everyone else for that moment. Can he keep that up? These things.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to come to Young Money in a second, I promise. One more question. I was speaking to a head of academy scouting for an MLS club, and he said that he felt over the past 15 years that the levels of everything has gone up in the US.
Mhm.
And he felt specifically that the levels of the average American player in the US now is quite considerably higher than the average was, say, 15 years ago.
Mhm.
But he said they're finding it hard or that he's seeing more broadly across the MLS and maybe US soccer more broadly for male and female to see sort of standout players who maybe are going to make it to that next level, maybe get the big European transfer. Obviously, some do. Would you say that you're seeing a similar thing yourself, or not? How are you seeing like an average player who's maybe a 7 out of 10 to that one you're looking for who could maybe make it to that next top level?
I think he's right in a sense that it's very true that the average is like so much better. Like technically, tactically, physically, in every category they're better. But as you said, it's really hard. It's becoming more and more hard to stand out. And but that's always been the case. I think, right? As in anywhere in the world, it's going to be the same. I think it's just investment. Because I think if you have so many people close, is realizing who to actually invest in. right? Who do you actually invest in? Because that's what really what's going to make the difference. That difference in that one player getting extra confidence and that one player getting that extra time would separate them in a lot of cases, right? You just got to realize like who is able to take in that information and separate and who's not. And I think that's where the MLS system is kind of like super inconsistent. I think a lot of teams are picking certain players for the wrong reasons or maybe the right reasons, but it's not translating efficiently enough at the first team level, right? Because, for example, I'll give you a big example of something that I've realized. Like, let's look at MLS defenders. It's no secret to everyone that MLS is a pretty transitional league, right? It's transition oriented, blah blah blah. But in the modern era, you think about the center back as over 6 foot. You know what I mean? But then you want to have that pace, right? Because you want to be able to transition. You see everyone with pace now, blah 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 blah, and it's over 6 foot. If you're not 6'2" in the academy, you're really not going to get that first team chance as a young center back, right? But if you analyze and you look at the MLS, you look at the starting center backs across all the top teams, a lot of them are under 6 foot, which is crazy. We realized that really it was just crazy. So you're not your youth guys that you're pulling up are not fitting the profiles that are actual guys that are actually making it in team. Because yeah, you gotta be able to handle the aerial duels, but if you're transition oriented, it doesn't matter how tall you are. Really, it shouldn't matter how tall you are. It's really the guys that are seeing the problems and able to solve them that are keeping their self in the team. Right, like Columbus Crew and those guys have, like, they don't always have big center backs. I mean, Vancouver did really well, and I think a lot of their center backs were under 6 foot, if not all of them, right? So I think like we have to get away from like a more profile based structure for the world, you know what I mean, and look at profiles based on your club, because yeah, we know that if you're 6'2" and you're fast and you give that guy some game speed, he's more attractive to German clubs and Premier League clubs and Italian clubs because he fits the prototype mold of a center back. But there's always gonna be Martinez's or Manchester United and guys that. But if your demographic for your MLS club is just a lot of Latin players that are not going to be over 6'2", why are you just only promoting a 6'2" kid in your academy that's never gonna
Yeah.
make it to your first team when you could promote this kid that could actually shine? So I think that is actually the issue with the MLS system, is not that like it's getting harder to identify them in a sense that they don't exist. And it's just that you just have to know who to invest in the right way for your club. And I think that's where there's too much inconsistency.
Yeah, perhaps there might be an evolution we'll see as the MLS matures and develops even more. Like maybe we'll see more kind of players being picked because of that model that you just said. Young Money, talk to me about Young Money. So you built your agency up, it's doing really well, and then Young Money come along and they want to acquire it. And what tell me about how that came about and what the plans are for you now, Young Money, and how that's going to work.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, must be a very lucky guy, right? Because things sometimes happen for a reason. Yeah, we're doing pretty well. I mean, nothing crazy spectacular that we're like breaking the internet and any particular deals. But like I said, my wife was a professional player as well. And like I had a personal training business back in the past, she had one as well, but mainly for women's players. In kind of in just for the fun of it. She just loves helping girls develop, and then she had some become, the NWSL, the U.S. national team, whatever. One of those girls, the father actually grew up with Wayne, Lil Wayne and them, and he saw what I was doing. I always have players in my house. Right now in my house, I have a Japanese player and his girlfriend are literally playing with my kids outside. Like it's just like I said, it's like family oriented aspect. And sometimes they'll go out and train with some of her, young girls, and because they're keeping fit in the off season. So the dad always saw, oh man, like you're doing something here, right? And then he's like, oh well, I grew up with these guys. They have an agency, but they have American football, basketball, and stuff like that. You should talk to them. Maybe there is some synergy there because they should probably get soccer because soccer is such a big world sport. So I really didn't like take it that seriously at first, I'm just in my own world. And then he's like, oh, let's set up a Zoom call. So he had set up a Zoom call with Mac Main, who's the president of Young Money Entertainment, which I didn't think was gonna happen. It was just so random, right? And then we just started talking sports, live, football, just like casually, and it really went well. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, like, that was really interesting because for me, it's about education." Like I was like, "Hey, this is the industry. You get 10% is the max you can get for an agent in commission wise in soccer. In the NFL and NBA, it's only 3%. Right there, it's already lucrative compared to what you guys do. Now we're a world thing. We have more leagues, we have more players, and blah 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 blah." And then his end, as a businessman, was like,
Really?
yeah, let's go, right? And so then we took it to the next meetings, and that's when I met Adie von Gontard, who he's the great grandson of the founder of Budweiser, the Bush family,
Hmm.
one of America's most successful families. But he was such a cool guy, and obviously he's a co-CEO with Wayne, and he was just talking to me about this, and I got to learn a little bit about what they do and their recruitment in football, and we just realized we had a lot that was similar. They're not really so corporate where maybe some of these other agencies that are huge agencies, they're like HR and corporate and this, and we have
Yeah.
revenue schemes, and we have to make this kind of. They were just more family oriented, and I came obviously it comes from. If you have a billionaire family, you don't really have the urge of like, I need to get this revenue to make this business work, right? And they were doing so many cool things in the NIL space. They had the Heisman Trophy winner in college football, and so many cool things that I was like, all right. And then they were kind of putting the question like, what would that look like if we kind of joined forces and you brought soccer to our agency and this and that, and then that's kind of how the conversation initially began. Like I'm saying, all right, what I'm already doing this in my eyes. I was like, I will get there in time. I know we were very sustainable. We did things the right way. Yeah, I'm not gonna blow up tomorrow and start signing Ronaldo and things like that. But in time, I know we're getting
Yeah.
better every year. But like obviously, I know that maybe if I have a brand name like Young Money, that could accelerate, that could add fuel to the fire, right? And we all seen what Rock Nation did, and with Jay-Z, and all this stuff. So it became intriguing to me to see what could happen. And yeah, it came to the point that they're like, hey, listen, we would love to join forces and give you the resources you need to build something really spectacular, really great, and your vision, because football, that we don't know that, and we'll let you do what you think is best. And that was really important to me, right? Because I've already been on this journey for some time, and what I envision, and not just my vision, but my partners and the guys that are my players. And one of the big things I said in that is like, yeah, that's cool, but I got to bring all my players. I'm not just gonna bring my MLS players. I want to bring my USL guys, my guys that are in college.
Yeah.
It's not. It wasn't gonna be this elitist agency for me. I wanted to have everything from the smallest to the biggest players, because we're all like examples of the ecosystem of the entire game. And I really wanted us to be like a very good, you know, so like for someone to look at an agency is like, all right, that's what football is about. Culturally diverse, economically diverse, all that kind of things. And that was kind of my vision, and they were really, really okay with that. And and that's kind of how it got started, really.
Nice. So what, yeah, well, how's it going to play out? What's the vision for Dennis? What's the long-term goals, and how are things going now?
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten, it took obviously, first of all, it took a minute to realize like what's our identity now, right? Obviously, the Young Money brand is not big outside of the US, right? So we've always wanted to be global. So our goal right now is to really build this brand globally, and not just doing the biggest shoots and blah blah blah. Like we recently just added a Premier League player that we're gonna build in Brandon, so that'll be announced. And I'm
Nice.
actually going over your side in London this week, because
I get
NFL.
a sneak preview, Dennis. Who is it? Can you say? Oh, not yet.
Yeah, yeah, right. But I'll be in London because the NFL game is going to be in London, right? And we have
Yeah.
NFL players, and we're going to try to have some kind of collab with this Premier League player that will
Yeah, cool.
also be at the World Cup. But yeah, I just didn't, obviously, I didn't want us to be, like when you think about Rock Nation, probably, which is a great agency, you think about like, Lukaku. Remember when they came out and Lukaku and De Bruyne and
Yeah.
it was this big thing, but I didn't want it to be one specific player that like you think about it. But yeah, you want to know that, oh yeah, they have Vinny Jr. We want to have those players, but it was really big for us to make it be about the agency first and as like a whole, like all the players and not just one big name, you know what I mean? So we didn't want to just launch with just big name players. So that's why, as we've seen, we've launched mainly with a lot of younger players, and then steadily we'll put some big names in there, right? And then you know what I mean? And so it's more balanced and not just like people just waiting to see what next big players will announce, and then the little guys kind of get thrown, thrown away. So I think, yeah, our strategy really is to find quality people and quality players, and really help build and guide and sustainably grow into the game. Obviously, we want to be not just player management, football consulting in general. Like I said, my father was into ownership, and then Orlando City became an MLS club, and they sold it to the Wolf family. So I have a lot of insights into that. My younger brother ended up becoming into the PR in the MLS, and he was Orlando City, then in Portland Timbers, then he did 7 years with Chicago Fire, and then FIFA just took him. So he's at FIFA in PR and marketing. So I had a thing, and then obviously my wife played, and that's why we had women's football, and that's why we're pushing up.
Yeah, a little ecosystem of your own, right?
Yeah, yeah, right there, and my brothers, I had a brother that was in the U.S. national team pool, and youth that I use my thing like, oh, you need to do this, and he became, what I mean, and so I just had like I've seen the game from so many different angles that and that I would love to give back in other ways. You know what I mean? Maybe in the club ownership in the future, we'll we'll never know. But we have a lot of aspects of and visions of how to not only build the agency side, but help grow the game in so many different places. Obviously the Caribbean is very important to me, and Jamaica especially, and I really want to see more and more. We have a lot of national team players from the Caribbean, youth players, and guys that are hopefully qualifying for the World Cup soon. So I mean, it'd be my goal to build in so many different areas, and I think this gives a lot of flexibility to do that and help so many people in so many different ways compared to just, yeah, we're the biggest because we do the biggest deals. Like that, I think that will come in time, but it's not gonna be our full identity.
Nice. I always finish up by asking people for their advice. And I want to ask you for two bits of advice. If you were going to give advice for a young player, 15, 16, 17, 18, who was on track to kind of go and do and play to a high level, what advice would you give them to keep going and to try and get to their very highest level? And the second would be, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to go into the sports agency and play a rep side of things? What to kind of, to make their way in that career space?
So for a player side, the biggest thing to be a player with any like kind of longevity, it's just knowing that it's a resilience game. It's a marathon, right? I think that you can ask any of the top players everywhere, it's never all sunshines and rainbows that going straight up. It's so many more negatives than positives, so many more negative than positive, really, because it's really competitive, right? You're coming in every day, you're competing. There's only one team that wins a title every year, right? However many teams in the leagues, if there's 18 teams, 17 sad faces at the end of the year, right? So, so unless you're winning every single year of your life, you're gonna have so many sad moments, and it's really to manage and let you hear this all the time, not let the highs get too high and not let the lows get too low. But I think the biggest thing for a young player is to realize to be appreciative of the journey itself. the journey, I don't remember a lot of those negatives. I look back at my career very fondly. So yeah, you might be going through these tough patches now and like, oh, you're never gonna escape and that coach is never gonna pick you and but like you're never gonna remember that. You're gonna only remember that grind and if you gave up, if you didn't give up, if you push yourself and the players that you got close to along the way. So I think to just sit, to really like looking on a journey and enjoy it is one of the biggest things I've seen in the young players. I think the young players really have that eye at the top too quickly, and they think that if I'm not 15 and starting at Barca like Yamal or winning Copa trophies that I'm like terrible. But no, everyone has their own path. It's just
Yeah.
Jamie Vardy's, right? There's so, but you can never lose if you don't quit. And I feel like a lot of people are just like if it doesn't go right for them, they're gonna quit, and you're never gonna make it at the levels that you want if you have that mindset. You just gotta roll with the punches and know that hey, listen, it might be great right now, but it's gonna be terrible soon. But I'm gonna last. So that would be like my big thing for the young players. And the agency stuff is a little bit more complicated. I think it takes a lot to be a great agent. A lot of luck, a lot of being in the right place. There's some guys that as they started becoming agent, they found this one player and it boom, and then now like they did a big deal and they're financially able to now fund everything else, and it just builds from there, right? And then there's a lot of people that like ourselves basically that grind from the bottom, like we're doing deals that you're getting 1K commission and but that the reward of seeing that player get that chance is really what fuels you. But it really depends on what you're going for, but like I would say for a new person, instead of just really especially with the FIFA agent exam now, get your licenses early, and instead of just only thinking about getting an internship or working for an agency, try to do it on your own. Learn those lessons yourself, because I think you're more valuable when you're actually going out and recruiting your own players and having them and try to place them. If I'm gonna get a guy, I'd rather get a guy that already has been through those hardship and know how hard it is to make a network of clubs and network of players and doing the business. And yeah, you might not have some big players now, but I know that they've grinded, and I'm like, all right, I don't have to hold that person's hand as much, right? So I think we should just, not try to not think about the failure in that aspect, and just the real journey and studying and what it takes, and study transfermarket.com and what moves they're making, and really become a student of the market and the game, regardless if your background is being a lawyer or an insurance agent or a financial planner. Anyone can really go into it, and to have becoming your own individual agent, meaning like what I'm good at and the player that might relate to me might not be the player that relates to you, and vice versa. So I think it's an industry that everyone can win in. I don't really look at a lot of agencies as my direct competition, because I think I offer a different value than Sensei Wasserman or something like that. So I think a lot of people take that competition a little bit too much, maybe because you go head to head for the players a little bit. But I just really don't look at it like that, and our team doesn't really look at it like that, because you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some. Some people are gonna want to go with some guys because of this. If I have a family friend that they trust me, they're gonna sign with me probably, right? Not because I'm technically the best agent in the world. It's just because they feel comfortable, and a lot of those decisions are made based off the heart and not necessarily the head. So I think once an agent knows that and to find their little niche, they can be successful. But when you start thinking that you have to go head to head with everyone else, it can be daunting, and you're never gonna start if that's the case.
For sure. Great advice, Dennis. Thanks so much. I had a whole bunch of other stuff to ask you. Maybe another time. But look, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting chat, and really good to kind of see the success you've had both on and off the pitch, I suppose, now as well with the agency side of things too. So congratulations on that success. And yeah, until part two, I'll catch you then. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me, like I said.